We are future of social work. And I'm really excited to have my colleague Jared Carroll with me today. We're going to be talking about some really interesting topics that is going to really dig deeper into what social work is. We'll talk about his work, some of the things that he has been doing at NYU, as well as through his agency, Play at the Core. I'm really excited to have you today, Jared. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Shaniqua. I'm really excited to be part of the conversation today.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I want to ask everyone to lift this message up by sharing it out to your networks and to your colleagues and to your friends and family. We want to make sure that we're amplifying these messages. We also want to make sure you're following us at all social media platforms at iRaise.org and also visiting our website at www.iraiseinc.org. All right, Jared, let's get started. I'm going to read your bio for those that don't know you so we can
Mhm.
highlight some of your work and then we'll jump into some questions. Jared is a social worker and youth development specialist with nearly 20 years of experience spanning the nonprofit, education, and mental health fields. His work includes direct practice, program administration, strategic planning, fundraising, and training and program leadership, development and implementation with youth serving and other human service organizations with a particular focus in programs that serve children affected by trauma. Jared's mission is to catalyze change that invites program practitioners, leaders, youth, and community members to envision the systems and supports they need to thrive and have maximum impact. As a senior consultant at CRE, Jared partners with organizations to develop practical solutions to challenges and promotes real change in communities. In his role, Jared has been leading CRE's explorations of generative AI, which we'll hear more about later on, in its applications and deepening the impact of the nonprofit sector. After returning to the US, Jarrett joined the International Humanitarian Organization, Right to Play, serving as US Program Director and overseeing their pilot play based technical assistance program, Play at the Core. This work evolved into a novel program consulting approach. And in 2017, Jarrett founded Play at the Core, LLC, which is a nonprofit program consulting organization that seeks to inspire healing and change through play. And Jarrett holds a bachelor's in history from Boston College and was named an Adaptive Leadership Fellow. Congratulations, while receiving his master's degree in social work from NYU. He's a lecturer at NYU's Silver School of Social Work, where he teaches exercising leadership in the nonprofit and public sectors and management and organizational practice for 21st century social work. Jared, that's quite an impressive bio you got there.
Well, I appreciate you highlighting the work. So I'm a senior consultant with the Community Resource Exchange. Um, I've been driving some of their AI practice work forward. I founded Play at the Core, which is a nonprofit consulting organization focused on strategic program design and development. And now I'm also an adjunct lecturer at NYU. So I've got a full plate. My social work it looks pretty wide.
Yeah. And I really love that. Can you start off by telling us about your journey? As you mentioned, you're doing quite expansive work within social work and really are maximizing your social work degree. Tell us more about that journey. What was that like for you from starting off to where you are today?
So I think my social work story started earlier than my professional career. Uh, I'm a survivor of early childhood trauma, and um, the the youth program that I was a part of um, had a tremendous impact on my life. right? So it's not lost on me the power and the potential of really really powerfully designed social work programs, from early childhood all the way through adulthood. And so my journey in social work, I think, is also braided with my own journey of healing. Um, and I had my first experience in youth development when I was in college, uh, as a youth program or youth development program facilitator, I should say. And that work was transformative for me. Up to that point, I thought I was going to be headed down a very different path professionally, but I was so excited by the design and the ability of programs to strengthen relationships and connections that promote healing, and the communities that can come together around that work, that can inspire collective healing. And from that point, uh, I I felt like social work was going to be the path for me, and I I never left my practice as a youth development programmer while I was in social work school. So I did a non-traditional degree route through NYU, and I worked full time throughout the degree. And it was incredibly powerful for me to be able to make these direct connections between what I was learning in the classroom and what I was seeing in our programs, and kind of create this like virtuous cycle, this feedback loop, right? To be able to apply the best practices I was learning about and see them in the immediate context of our program design. Um, and so for me now, that's my ongoing laboratory. I have the space to be able to engage with organizations across the sector, through my work with the Community Resource Exchange, and then also with some of our partners at Play at the Core. And I get to engage with social work students to think about how some of the challenges that we wrestle with as a sector show up for them, in their practicums, in their field study, and really try to make that consistent connection between what we're understanding as best practices in social work and the reality of what we see, within agencies and across the sector.
So that's very powerful. You talked about being in youth development during the time of your education at NYU. And I can imagine that it was quite eye opening for you to be able to have this sort of transformational experience where you were learning from a new lens. Um, can you tell us what were some of your aha moments during that time? And what were some of and how has it led you into what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think my greatest aha moment was the disparity between what we all understand as best practices and what we actually see in systems.
Yeah.
And I had a tremendous mentor, teacher, supervisor in Dr. Linda Lassell Bryant, who's now the associate dean at NYU Silver. Um, and we had a series of conversations over the course of a year and a half about that disparity, right? And the connection kind of to our uh, our field's history, right? That in many ways that disconnect, that divide between what we understand as the the values that guide best practices in client engagement, in community engagement, in program design, um, often don't show up for us as clinicians. And not only that, um, that's kind of the expected reality, right? That
Mm,
we're gonna step into jobs that undervalue or exploit us, right? That we're not gonna make
absolutely.
good money,
Yeah.
that we're gonna be overtaxed
Hmm.
in terms of the number of clients or programs that we are meant to deliver.
Yeah.
Um, and it's going to feel woefully inadequate for
Mm,
the work that we are aiming to do, right? That there's a deep history there.
yeah.
Um, and so the conversations that we had were really grounded in imagining a different potential reality? And what could it look like if we thought about program design and delivery to correct for that? And what might that mean in terms of how we structure organizations, how we engage with colleagues, in service of the work? And I started to explore more around the intersection of social work theory and um, management consulting, organizational development. And there is a ton of research connecting organizational or the quality of organizational culture to the quality of outcomes for individuals and client communities. Um, and it's not often spoken about. It's not something that we have conversations about, certainly in social work school or in the field. But if we can seek to create greater alignment, borrowing from what we know are best practices and how we deliver services, and internalize that, it strengthens the sector. It strengthens our abilities as clinicians. And it makes our work with our clients and the communities even more impactful. That it's not this kind of like trade-off that I think folks often frame it as. And I think that that was probably the deepest learning that came out of my social work education experience, that continues to inform my work today, was those conversations with Dr. Linda LaSalle Bryant, in being able to reimagine a sector that has some pretty deep-seated inequities in terms of what we expect of the professionals who do that work.
It's so powerful, Jared. And, I just, what a huge aha moment for you as a student, right? To have. I think for me, that aha moment didn't come to very much later on in social work.
Well, I think part of it also was, I had worked in social work programs. I wasn't a social work practitioner, but I had worked in human services programs for about 10 years before I went to social work school.
Right.
So I feel like the realities of the dynamics within a lot of nonprofit organizations was very real for me as I was starting to engage in my social work education.
Yeah.
And I think that that disparity had always been painful for me, but I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know the context behind it, right? And so to be able to process that with my mentor, and to hear her own lived experiences over decades in the field, that this is not something that is new. And if anything, it's only gotten deeper and more challenging post-pandemic, right? The importance of us recognizing that and engaging with that disparity, I think, is more important now than ever.
Absolutely. And it's making me think about this also. As social workers, we are trained to address things on a systemic level and to address these social problems systemically. I think the part that you're also highlighting, Jared, is the disparities. We expect the disparities in our systems, but we don't expect to be the ones that create and perpetrate the disparities in the name of healing and helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we've seen in so many of our systems, whether it's child welfare or whether it's education. We've seen these disparities perpetrated. And in some respects, social workers, we've participated and been complicit in it without knowing.
Yeah, I think it's very rooted in the narratives about the field, right? Like, I remember the first day of my practice class in social work being told by the professor the importance of understanding why you were in the room. And that resonated, right? And then they continued on, because you're not here for the money. And I was given pause, and nobody said I was,
Right.
but also nobody here is seeking to sign a vow of poverty, right? Like,
Right.
I think that there is this pervasive,
Misunderstanding.
martyrdom that exists within the field, right? That like
Yeah.
the goal is to be a bleeding heart and bleed out,
Mm,
right? And then who is served ultimately, right?
mm,
Is it an exercise in our own self-satisfaction at fully giving ourselves to the work, or is it about moving and progressing towards the social change that we want our work to represent?
yeah.
um, and I think that there's a lot of kind of wrestling that we need to do with those narratives that I think
Mhm.
are rooted in kind of the legacy of how the profession was formed by uh, mostly wealthy individuals who are just trying to do good by people who they saw as having uh, less opportunities or being worse off than them, right? There was this kind of inherent
Mhm.
disparity.
Mhm.
But if we want our work to be more through a liberatory frame,
Mm.
how do we see our collective humanity? How do we address that inequity? How do we see kind of the integration of our 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 healing work and our own healing as intertwined? I think that's it calls us to think about the work in a different way. Um, and it is a reimagining of what systems should look like.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the ways that we go about our work, a lot of the ways that agencies are designed, are predicated on the old paradigm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a moment to really pause at what you were saying. There's so many narratives within our sector that we have to continue grappling with and wrestling with and finding better ways um, to truly look at what healing really actually looks like. Um, there's so much we can go into with that, but we don't have enough time. So I want to move on in the spirit of what you're saying. You have a course that you teach at NYU around nonprofit um, management, which I think is just absolutely transcending. When I was at Columbia, we had no such course. And if we did, I think it would have better prepared me in my role today. But I love what the work that you're doing around your nonprofit course and adaptive leadership. And wonder if you can speak more to how are you preparing students to address some of these disparities that you just talked about, as well as how are you challenging them to grapple with these narratives?
Yeah. So my work with the course again is due very much to my mentor, Dr. Linda Lassell Bryant. Developed the original skeleton for this course, and her plate is so full that I had the opportunity to kind of like take what she had built and continue to build on it. I think the initial intention behind the course was absolutely aligned with what you're sharing. That there's a gap in social work education around what it means to see ourselves as social work leaders,
Yeah.
um, and not leaders in the way that one day we will arrive at a CEO position and isn't it cool that we're also social workers? But how do we see our social work practice as an act of leadership?
Sure.
um, and thinking about the ways that we engage with the complex, nuanced challenges that our clients are wrestling with, but that also we're seeing within our agencies. It's incredibly powerful exploration and learning that wasn't happening. Um, and so I think in many ways I was wanting with Dr. LaSalle Bryant to correct for a gap that we saw in our own experience. Um, we have leveraged a few different frameworks. The adaptive leadership framework is certainly one of them. And it's been really powerful to think about how this framework, which was not designed in the social work context, might be adapted to fit our values and the ways that we engage with complex social challenges. And it's required some kind of very critical reflection about the ways that it's framed. It's originally designed in in kind of a foreign policy kind of bureaucratic context, right? It came out of Harvard's Kennedy School, but to see it, the power that it could have in driving social change, right, requires us to kind of think about how we have it greater align with our values as social work professionals. Um, I think we've also done a lot of work in wanting to develop some frameworks that can support that muscle of parallel process, right? We oftentimes we think about parallel process and it's directly related to kind of the ways that the dynamics that we see between our clients and ourselves show up in how we engage with, say, our supervisor.
Sure.
But Dr. LaSalle Brown and I were thinking about, well, what could it look like for us to flip this idea of parallel process through a positivist lens, through an asset-based lens, and
Yeah.
thinking about what does it look like for us to take what we know is powerful and has impact in our clinical work or in our program work and have really meaningful conversations that articulate our power
Mhm.
as social work professionals, have really honest conversations about the ways that those same practices or approaches show up or not in our
Mhm.
work with our colleagues, right?
Right.
And to release our pain by kind of naming that out loud, and to step into a place of visioning or imagining what could it look like if these systems or these ways that we engage as colleagues were more aligned with what we understand to be best practices in our work, and really seeking to live our purpose, right? More fully integrate our values and our practices within our systems. Um, so we've had a lot of conversations with students about what they now, as students who are getting ready to receive their MSW, understand as best practices in their work, and how those same practices show up or don't in their practicums or in their social work classrooms, and the power and the potential of the impact that that could have if there was greater alignment. And I think that that for me is a really powerful conversation to have with social work practitioners in general, um, but particularly when folks are really close to their study of the theory, because their lens for the dissonance is so focused.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the potential and for them to step into that, coupled with this idea within adaptive leadership that anyone can practice leadership, is incredibly empowering, right? That they can ask questions of their supervisors, of their colleagues that can drive this work forward, and that is leadership. So
Yes.
it's been really fun to continue to develop that course, and to engage in those conversations with young professionals who are very very close to uh, joining our ranks.
I'm excited to see the work once they're in the field and they graduate, the impact of what they've learned and the new paradigm that they've received. It sounds like there's so much transformation happening in those classrooms, and and I'm excited to see what comes out of it. So please keep me in the loop as it's developing and as students are graduating and going into leadership and in other parts of our sector.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so there's so much to social work, and it's why I believe it's the greatest profession on planet Earth. One of the I think the parts of social work that is kind of um, underdeveloped is in the tech space, and you've been doing great work around AI at CRE, the Community Resource Exchange, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that work. We talked a little bit before we went live, and I'm just going to pull my notes out. We talked a little bit about the digital divide that's happening. Um, Within our sector, the biases that are at play within AI. We talked about inequities within algorithms, um, and that primarily being from sources that AI is pulling from.
Mhm.
That is perpetually and that's perpetually inequitable. And we talked about reimagining social work through the power of AI. Can you talk about your work as it relates to AI and ways that we can deepen our work and our human connection.
Sure. No, it's been a growing fascination of mine. I am not a technologist, but I think one of the drivers behind this work has absolutely been the space that the Community Resource Exchange has created for this exploration. And I feel deep alignment with the vision of our CEO for this process of upbuilding. And this is a term that she has coined in the wake of a post-pandemic nonprofit sector where so many of the inequities and shortcomings of our system were laid to bear, that the goal should not be for us to engage in capacity building, but for us to be engaging in upbuilding, right? Into reimagining and revisioning what the systems and the ways that we engage as nonprofit professionals should look like, right? That the old paradigm was not serving. And so there's very little advantage in us seeking to just rework what is inadequate. And so I had an opportunity in the fall to start to explore what might it look like for us as consultants at CRE to play with this new technology. And in particular, I was utilizing ChatGPT, right? So it was a generative AI platform. I'm sure folks who are watching are familiar with it. My exploration was, it was very, how should I describe it? My exploration was really infantile at first. Like it was simply asking questions like, how could I use ChatGPT in nonprofit consulting? And even that question, right? The incredible, like the vast ideas that were presented to that question were like, they were like making the hair on my neck stand. I was like, this is, I can't even believe this, right? So I continued to explore and I continued to share what I was learning with my colleagues. And we started to think about the importance of being able to create space for exploration of these tools with other nonprofit colleagues. So in January, we hosted a webinar about the uses of AI in the nonprofit sector. And we actually just recently concluded an AI boot camp for nonprofit professionals.
Wow.
That was seeking to expose folks to this technology, to think about the ways that we might begin to integrate it into our work, and to do so in a way that was centering humanity and our commitment to equity, which I think is incredibly different from the ways that the technology has been portrayed in the media, right? I think when we hear about AI, when we hear about chatbots or ChatGPT, where it's often through a very cautionary lens, right? About the inequities that these algorithms are perpetuating, and the potential harm that it could cause within the human services sector. And I'm not trying to diminish those stories. I think that they are absolutely based in fact. I think the important piece from my perspective and with my colleagues at CRE that we've been talking about is there is incredible importance in us as nonprofit professionals, as social workers, understanding this technology and beginning to engage with it.
Sure.
Because we understand what it looks like to seek to center equity in our work, to design and develop programs and ways of engaging with clients and communities that do center assets, that do seek to position them as agents of change, and that do seek to co-create new realities based on the context that they're facing. So we, as we begin to engage with that technology, can push back. We can understand where the limits of how we utilize it should be. And in absence of us having those conversations, that vacuum gets filled by folks who don't understand the context of our work, right? It is folks who have developed tools within the for-profit sector that just overlay this technology onto the nonprofit sector, which is the way that technological advancements have happened for decades in our
Yeah.
field, right? It's just that it's perfected within the for-profit sector, and then folks just say,
I mean,
well, if
just
it works for us, it's going
right.
to work for you all.
Yeah.
But given how important our values orientation and the way that we think about our work is, I don't believe that there's anyone better suited than social workers and nonprofit professionals to begin to play with these tools and to think about the ways that they could be applied in our work to have impact that does strengthen human connection, that does further equity within our programs. So it's been very fun. I've been learning a ton as I've been partnering with this technology, but also partnering with colleagues and trying to make sense of what we're learning.
Wow. And I had so many thoughts when you were speaking, Jared, about what it would look like for social workers to be at the table when some of these AI or technologies are created and designed, and have a seat at the table to be able to ensure it's things are designed with equity, with an equity lens, with an equitable lens, and then also the importance of social workers in that tech space, right? And I don't know what that may look like. If we may need to have some technology or AI courses within schools of social work and continuing education, or perhaps executive education course and nonprofit AI or social work in AI, and ways to sort of use these technologies to push our work forward, but also to push back when we are seeing any disparities that are showing up in AI space.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think it's something that we've been talking about a lot in our work with CRE is what does it look like for us to carve out the space for ourselves to experiment? What are the guidelines or the parameters or the ethical considerations we have to have within that space, right? But how do we create a bit of a sandbox for ourselves to play in here? And I can share that in my course at NYU, uh, I've been inviting students to. There's an assignment that we have twice throughout the course of the semester where um, members of the class will utilize the readings from that week to design in collaboration with AI a social work a social work education learning activity, right? That's seeking to that they co-facilitate with their colleagues in the class as a way to deepen the concepts, the themes that were emerging through the readings, right? And that they leverage the AI as a way to design the structure for that activity, that dialogue that takes place. And it's been really exciting to partner with students in thinking about the direct applications to social work program design, right? That we're utilizing this technology to create a space for our social work learning and able to push back if we're feeling like the structure of the conversation or the themes that it's prioritizing are not aligned with what we're wanting. But that we can start to develop that practice together and share our experiences along the way.
And it's such a model, Jared, is what you're doing, allowing this space for social workers to engage, to play, to iterate, to experiment with these tools that we will, whether we want to or not, have to interface with. I think, again, we talked about this, but AI sounds very intimidating for most people. And I think a part of it is not knowing what to do with it and how to utilize it. And what you're doing with your course is you're giving space and opportunity and guidelines for social work students to be able to engage with these tools, to be comfortable, to be able to explore ways to combine or to integrate it into the work. Um, I'll mention one thing with technology, and this is something that we have been grappling with at my agency, and it's the idea of our young people who are using social media as a form of venting,
Mm.
and um, and not using it in appropriate context, and because of it, they're exposed to they're overexposing themselves, but also exposed to a lot of content that is triggering signs of uh, trauma or anxiety behaviors or depressive behavior and symptoms and so forth. And so I'm wondering whether in your work you will consider or have considered ways that we can create um, technological interventions that support our kids' well-being and mental health, whether it's through VR, virtual reality games that are geared towards improving their well-being, or ways that we can really integrate technology into the therapeutic space.
Mm. Uh, I don't know. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I can share with you the ways that I've been utilizing the technology to be able to think about those types of challenges in my social work context. And I've been partnering with AI to design programming. So what does it look like to partner with these platforms to frame the goals of the work, right? What are the objectives of the ways that we want to come together in an actual human way, right? Like we're talking about in-person program
Yeah.
design, right? And to be able to frame that goal for the AI and leverage my creativity and understanding, ways to structure conversations or activities that could drive that work forward, but to be able to prompt the AI to tweak the activities, right? To provide me with different ideas or potential pathways for how to structure those spaces, is exposing me to just this wealth of potential options, right? And as a programmer, it's like really exciting. It's like I used to look in like activity books for inspiration, and now I can partner with these technologies and thinking about I would love a dozen different potential activity ideas that would help frame dialogue around the best ways to express frustration that I feel as a teenager, right? Like to use your example, right? And to be able to use the technology as a way to help frame that, I can provide tremendous context. I can say that I'm working with youth that have been having a lot of difficulty uh, in that they've been expressing frustrations that they've been feeling through social media platforms, and it's resulting in negative impacts for them because of the overexposure of their of their perspectives, and also what they're receiving in response, right? And I'm looking to create something where we can engage together within our agency to have conversations about what it looks like to create meaningful spaces for that type of self-expression,
That,
and to have the AI be able to present at least the start of ideas that then I can build, um, and even kind of develop questions with, right? It's been a lot of prompt engineering that I've been doing, and I feel as though a lot of the work over the next year and a half, as folks are kind of beginning to engage with this technology, will be focused on that. Um, just
sure.
for us to be able to understand how we see it folding into our work as programmers. And when I say programmers, I mean social work programmers, not computer programmers, right?
Right.
Um, but then from there, I think the potential for what you're talking about becomes something that's closer to reach,
Yeah.
right? So if we're already thinking about ways that we integrate this technology, we could also use this technology for us to think about what it might look like for us to develop virtual platforms for that same type of engagement, right? So I think that there's a way for us to partner with this technology that does not require us to hand over our agency, but also allows us to embrace innovation as a way to move our work forward in ways that feel aligned with our values.
That's incredible, Jared. I think you hit it right there. It's moving our work forward using innovation, but remaining true to our values and to the core of our work. That I want. I want to see what the future will look like when we have at least mastered that. So, this conversation has been very enlightening. We talked about quite a number of topics, and we're getting ready to come to a close, but I did want to ask one last question around what the future of social work looks like and utilizing some of your theories that you've been experimenting on testing around not necessarily adaptive leadership, but parallel process. Some of the work around AI and some of your other work around programming. What does the future of social work look like when we have effectively prepared social workers in these realms and in these fields?
I think my hope is that conversations like the ones we're having today become more universal. That young social workers, folks who are in the process of their social work education, are exposed to and really develop the muscle that makes the connection between our clinical or our program work and our systems work, right? We talk about this divide between micro and macro perpetually, but we also there's this adage that's what's micro is macro and vice versa. So how do we more fully live into that? And how do we seek to explicitly build that muscle that allows us to make connections between what we know is powerful and has impact in our social work practice and the ways that we engage with our colleagues and the systems that we designed to move that work forward. I think that there's tremendous potential for us to reimagine the human services sector because it essentially has taken a post-industrial model
Yeah.
and foisted it upon human services, right? Like we
Mhm.
operate like for-profit corporations, even
Yeah.
though we are nonprofits, and there's a dissonance there. There's a values dissonance, and then there's a structural dissonance because while there may be some efficiencies that we gain, there's a lot of tension between how we drive our work forward and the ways that power is structured within those organizations, right? So I'm hopeful that as we normalize conversations like this, as we strengthen those muscles as practitioners, making the connection between our micro practice or our meso practice and our macro reality, that we can move closer to a more healing centered system that connects our work. Because I think that we're operating right now in a system that still feels very siloed, still feels very separated,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of practitioners still feel very isolated. Um, and one thing that I've found is through my work, being able to connect with community has driven the work forward, which is true in programming, but it's very true in these professional contexts as well. So I think if I'm optimistic, is that we lean in more there, and that we start to see a more oneness or a wholeness in our work.
That's incredible. And I'm hopeful with you and am fully hopeful. And I believe in this work, everything around aligning our values um, and ensuring our macro and micro, they are integrated, they are one. Um, and I want to see that reflected in our field, in our sector for sure. I want to see that divide completely broken. I would love to see what it looks like for us to work together to push this incredible, great work forward, centered around healing and humanity. And it requires both micro and macro working together and being one. Um, and breaking down those walls and our values really aligning. And so this is incredible. This is social work month, and we are excited about the future of social work, the present of social work, and the incredible work that all of the social workers across this world is doing.
Yeah, no, I'm very bullish on our profession. I think that there is tremendous potential,
Yeah.
particularly as we seek greater alignment, to actually move closer to the social change that we've been striving for decades and generations. And it's an exciting time for
It
that reason.
is. It's an excited time to be a social worker.
It is. It is. It definitely is.
Absolutely. Well, Jared, it's been a pleasure having you on today and learning from you, from your work, the incredible concepts and theories that you're testing and you're developing for your bravery and your confidence and our work and your commitment. Thank you so much. And how could people reach you if they want to reach out to you around CRE, Play at the Core, or NYU? How could they reach out to you?
The best way to reach out to us at CRE is through our webpage. So it's crenyc.org. And you can find me there. But then also my email is jcarroll@crenyc.org.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. And thank you all for watching and for tuning in to today's episode on the future of social work. We want you to do us a favor. If you enjoyed this conversation, like it, react, and share it out to other colleagues, coworkers, or family members. We're going to continue uplifting this incredible message around humanity and healing and the work of social workers. We also want to wish all of our incredible social workers around the world a very happy Social Work Month. We appreciate you, we value you, and we thank you for your commitment to humanity. Thank you again, Jared. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope this is not the last time we can bring you on in the future.
No, I look forward to more conversations. Thank you so much, Shaniqua, for having me.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for next week's episode.